The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I'm Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show podcast and YouTube channel. You can find me anywhere. You can find all of my work at thebenjaminDixonshow.com. David will be back next week. I will be with you for the rest of this week. Let's jump into the chaos that was the Kavanaugh hearings on yesterday. Yesterday, the Senate held their first session in confirming Brett Kavanaugh to become Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court, the next justice on the Supreme Court. And, you know, the Democrats don't really have many options on the table in terms of how they can stop this guy, who has clearly demonstrated in his writings previously that he is going to the Supreme Court for one thing in particular, and that is to overturn Roe versus Wade. But subsequently, there's also another thing that he's potentially there for, which is to give cover to President Donald Trump in the Mueller probe and the investigation. So I want to take a look at a couple of clips here that can give you an idea of how yesterday played out. Take a look at this first clip.
Confirmation hearing on the nomination of
Mr. Chairman.
Brett Kavanaugh.
Mr. Chairman.
To serve as Associate Justice.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized for a question before we proceed.
Regular order, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized to ask a question before we proceed. The committee received just last night, less than 15 hours ago, 42,000 pages of documents that we have not had an opportunity to review or read or analyze.
Mr. Chairman, if we cannot be recognized, I move to adjourn.
The American people.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Directly from Judge Kavanaugh later this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn. Mr. Chairman, we have been denied real access to the documents we need to advise.
Mr. Chairman, regular order is called for.
Which turns this hearing into a charade and a mockery of our norms. Well, and Mr. Chairman, I therefore move to adjourn this hearing.
And as you can see, the Democrats attempted to use a technique to essentially and rightfully reject this hearing altogether. To adjourn the hearing, you'll see later Senator Blumenthal attempted to actually get a vote to end the hearing. But here is Kamala Harris letting the record show that they received 40,000 documents the night before the hearing and a document dump in order to get away with essentially hiding the majority of this candidates, of this nominee's record, particularly at a critical time in American history during the Iraq War and on so many critical issues, including abortion and gay marriage, LGBT rights in general. And so Kamala Harris is doing her best to resist in this way. There were protesters throughout the entire event. Some were arrested, most were carried out, and the hearing devolved into a bit of chaos. But I want to play a clip in particular of Senator Chris Coons, who calls out Kavanaugh directly to his face, and this is what he had to say.
I want to pause for a moment on this last point because the context of your nomination troubles me the most. In reviewing your records, Judge, you've questioned the lawfulness of United States v. Nixon, an historic decision in which a unanimous court said the president had to comply with a grand jury subpoena. You've questioned the correctness of Morrison v. Olson, a 30-year-old precedent holding that Congress can create an independent counsel with the authority to investigate the president, who the president can't just fire on a whim. You've questioned whether a president and his aides should be subject to any civil or criminal investigations while in office. We have to confront an uncomfortable but important question about whether President Trump may have selected you, Judge Kavanaugh, with an eye towards protecting himself.
So, you know, in terms of confirmation hearings, this is quite dramatic. He said it with a calm face, with a calm tone, rather, but he let it be known that he believes that there's a possibility that he was picked, that Brett Kavanaugh was picked specifically to provide judicial cover for the president of the United States to be able to weasel his way out of this, of the Mueller investigation. And this is a serious accusation that really carries a significant amount of implications. If Brett Kavanaugh is nominated, or rather if Brett Kavanaugh is appointed, he has demonstrated in his writings, he's demonstrated in previous decisions, and he's indicated via just commentary in general that he believes in an even stronger executive branch, unitary presidential power to be able to really stand above the law. And this is the exact type of person that Donald Trump would need to get away with the things that he's ruminating over that he wants to do, like a self-pardon, for example, or whether or not the president can be indicted while he's in office. Brett Kavanaugh has landed on the side of absolutely not. But there was even more chaos when Senator Blumenthal, who objected because they did not have enough time to review the records that were dumped on them the night before, he was trying to call for a vote to adjourn the session, and the chairman of the committee absolutely refused to abide by the rules of the committee. Take a listen in here.
The chairman is not above the rules of the committee. I asked for a roll call vote to overturn the ruling of the chair and to allow for a vote on my motion to adjourn these proceedings.
That would be an appropriate motion if we were in executive business session, but we're not in executive business session, so it's denied.
Mr. Chairman, I will proceed under protest. We've had a lot of rhetoric so far about rules and norms. I am very regretful that the chair has adopted this stance, which in my view contradicts our basic norms and rules, but I will proceed.
We absolutely have to understand that you cannot be reasonable with unreasonable people. And in this case, Senator Blumenthal is taken aback because of how stone-faced and how, with a straight face, Chuck Grassley is telling him that, no, you don't know the rules. These are the rules. But Senator Blumenthal clearly has outlined the case that Chuck Grassley is breaking the institutional rules. This is exactly what it looks like when you have a person who's trying to play by the rules going up against a person who doesn't give 2 cents about the rules. I have to remember I'm on David's program, so I'm choosing my words very carefully here. But Chuck Grassley doesn't care. Chuck Grassley doesn't care that he's breaking the rules of the Senate, of that committee. He doesn't care that he's doing it in front of the entire nation. He doesn't care that he will subsequently be found to have broken the rules because there's no ramifications for him. He has nothing to lose. His singular job is to ram this through by any means necessary. And this is the asymmetrical fight that I talk about on my program all the time. You have Democrats who, if you look at Senator Blumenthal, he clearly looks shocked. I'm not, you're not. Anyone who's been paying attention over the last 20 years is not shocked that this is the tactic that the Republicans are going to use. Right. But in the face of Senator Blumenthal, he just cannot believe that Chuck Grassley is going to sit in front of the American people and with a straight face lie. Well, that's what happens when you try to abide by the rules and you're going up against someone who doesn't care about the rules whatsoever. It's an asymmetrical political battle, and you cannot win. The Democrats cannot win in this type of environment if they are not willing to fight dirty, just like the Republicans are fighting dirty. By all means, like if they can fight dirty to do the wrong things, shouldn't the Democrats be willing to fight just as dirty? I was going to try to find another word for it, but just as intensely as the Republicans to do the right thing. And speaking of Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, something astonishing happened as they prepared to break for lunch during yesterday's hearing. I want to bring a photo up on your screen. There is video, but I want to show the video, the photo first, because the photo alone, look at this. You can see the caliber of person that Brett Kavanaugh is, or rather isn't in this case. I mean, just look at the smug condescension in his eyes as this man approaches him to shake his hand. The man reaching out to shake his hand is Fred Guttenberg, who is the father of Jamie Guttenberg, one of the many students who was killed in Parkland, Florida, back on February 14th of this year. You know, in the massacre, it was a tragedy. And he was introducing himself to Brett Kavanaugh. And you can see Kavanaugh refused to shake his hand. Now, people are saying that, oh, well, this isn't what it looks like. You know, conservatives are spinning this any kind of way they possibly can. But there's video. Take a look at this video of just how much Kavanaugh thought about it and then refused to shake this man's hand. I mean, there's no way you could spin this. There's absolutely no way that you could spin this other than Kavanaugh looked at Fred Guttenberg, calculated in his head, had 3 seconds there that I counted. He calculated in his head to listen to him. He listened to Fred as he introduced himself and said, my daughter was one of the ones killed in Parkland, Florida. And Kavanaugh turned around and walked away. Now, other people are saying, and actually I want to bring up this tweet from Raj Shah, who was the deputy press secretary for Donald Trump. And I'll read it on your screen now. He said, quote, as Judge Kavanaugh left for his lunch break, an unidentified individual approached him. Before the judge was able to shake his hand, security had intervened. Really, Raj, I mean, there's video that all of us can see, right? And, you know, and it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to play the video again. Let's play the video again here so that you can see it yourself. And I'm going to narrate so that you actually, no, I'm not going to narrate because I want you to see it for yourself. At what point did security intervene? Take a look. So, as you could see, security didn't intervene until Brett Kavanaugh had already turned around and began walking away. Regardless, how difficult is it for you to show some decency and just some empathy or just common courtesy? Right? You're on a national stage, on a national platform, and you're trying to convince America that you are the best pick for the next justice on the Supreme Court. That's what you're trying to do. And instead of calculating that maybe I should just shake this man's hand, there's nothing hard about shaking someone's hand, especially when I'm in the limelight. For Brett Kavanaugh to reject this in front of thousands of faces, not thousands, but hundreds of cameras and video and witnesses, it means that he has absolutely no regard for anyone else but his own agenda. I mean, it takes a lot for you to refuse to shake someone's hand. Let's just start there, right? It takes an absolute lot of gall for you to refuse to shake someone's hand in this type of setting. But he did that. Now, conservatives are attacking Fred Guttenberg, saying that he sandbagged him, that he caught him off guard, or that he was an unidentified man. And Dianne Feinstein had this to say about it because she wanted to make sure that the record was clear. This is what she said on Twitter. She said, quote, I invited Fred Guttenberg to sit in the audience at today's hearing because the Supreme Court affects the lives of real people. He knows firsthand how Brett Kavanaugh's extreme views on guns could lead to more massacres. Thank you, Fred, for honoring your daughter. I mean, so he obviously would not have been there if he wasn't supposed to be there. But even if, I mean, how many people approach you are, whether you want to call his position a politician or not, right now, before you get into your office as justice on the Supreme Court, you are politicking. And part of politicking is shaking hands. It is the most fundamental, most basic step in politicking. No, he is not going to be an elected official, but he is not a justice yet. And right now, he's campaigning in his own way to convince America that he's the best choice. And this is what he does with this opportunity. Now, I want to play a clip from Fred Guttenberg, who explained exactly why he did what he did yesterday.
Candidly, my hope to him was simply to say, I hope you change your stance. I hope you look in my eye. I hope you see that this pin that I wear on my lapel or these bracelets that I wear, that's all I have to get close to my daughter now. And I hope you can be part of making sure no other parent has to feel the way I do, because we can fix this. And I'm concerned that he won't be that person. But he's a father, and I was hoping to appeal to that.
And truth be told, the reality is that Brett Kavanaugh is being funded. His campaign to become the justice on the Supreme Court is being pushed and promoted by the NRA. So there's not much room for coincidences in this type of scenario. A man who has had millions of dollars poured into his push to become a justice on the Supreme Court by the NRA looked at a father who was waging his own battle against the NRA and decided that he's not worth my time to shake his hand. Listen, it's small moments like these that reveal to you the caliber of a person, the caliber of a man, a caliber of a leader, of a potential leader. And this definitely demonstrates that Brett Kavanaugh is not the type of person that we need on the Supreme Court, let alone all of the issues. Right. Let's be sure we knew this before this photograph. We knew that he's the wrong person on abortion. He's the wrong person on gun control. He's the wrong person on privacy. He's the wrong person on any litany. He's definitely the wrong person in terms of constraining the powers of the presidency. Right. He's literally been picked so that he can give President Trump all of the leeway he can from the judiciary in this investigation that's happening with Bob Mueller. So we already knew that he was not the type of person that we needed in this country. But it's something, and I pull up the image on the screen one more time. It's something when you can capture all of that in a single image.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, filling in for David for the rest of the week. Let's get right to it. Young progressives are winning. We're seeing a trend around the country where a new generation of leaders are emerging to take the helm of the Democratic Party, to be the face of a new generation of leaders that are, quite frankly, for the most part, more progressive than what we've seen at least in my lifetime. Last night, Ayanna Pressley, who is a Boston City Council member, ousted sitting the 10-term representative from the 7th District in Massachusetts, Michael Capuano. And to be sure, Capuano has a record of being extremely progressive. So the win last night wasn't a referendum like we've seen across the country of centrist Democrats being ousted, those Democrats who go the third way and triangulate. Last night was more about a generational shift and a changing of the guard. In fact, one report from last night said that they didn't have anything against the incumbent. They actually liked the incumbent, but they felt that it was time for new faces and new blood to go to Washington, D.C. And this is interesting because one of the things I discussed about 2 years ago, right after the election, was that the Democratic Party did not have a bench. The Democratic Party did not have a deep enough bench where we could look and see, like, here are the competitors to lead the Democratic Party into the future. All we had were a lot of aging old men, quite frankly. And now we're seeing a very diverse group of people with qualifications who are progressive, who are running on Medicare for all. Some are running on abolishing ICE. Some are more further to the left than others. But we're seeing a new wave of progressive leadership going to Congress. And it's a very important shift that's happening right now. I want to pull up a picture of Ayanna Pressley, and you can see in the picture that she has this photo with another leader of the Democratic Party, young leader of the Democratic Party, who hasn't even taken office yet, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who herself ousted a 10-term representative in New York, Joe Crowley. And so, it's a very interesting time to see a new wave of leadership taking over the Democratic Party, because that's what was necessary to begin with. It has to be bold and brash leadership that's willing to fight. Another example of a new leader in the Democratic Party, Stacey Abrams. She bested the Democratic establishment here in Georgia. You can pull the photo up on the screen. She is she's running as a Democratic nominee to become the first African-American governor, and quite frankly, one of the first Democratic governors in Georgia in a long time. Right. Georgia has been controlled by Republicans in time immemorial. I can't even remember the last time a Democrat was in power. Same thing in the state of Florida. Andrew Gillum. He definitely upset the Democratic establishment. The daughter of a former governor, I believe is Graham, if my memory serves me correctly. He beat her in the primaries, and now he's running against one of Donald Trump's clones to become the first African-American governor of Florida, as well as the first Democratic governor in the last 20 years. There hasn't been a Democratic governor in the state of Florida in 20 years. So when you add this together, and actually before I go any further, I want to mention a local race in St. Louis where you had the young guy Wesley Bell, who put out Bob McCullough from the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney position. He beat him. Right. And so there are examples of this all across the country where young, idealistic, energetic, qualified, and ready to fight progressives are winning. So this is encouraging. And in a way, I mean, to almost be cliche, I think this should be encouragement for anyone who believes that the system needs to change to run. Because we're seeing a shifting of the old vanguard, the old guard. They're being voted out. And in some cases, it's nothing against their politics, like in Massachusetts. It's really nothing against Capuano's politics. I mean, he was a progressive guy. But it's also something, you've been there 10 terms, 20 years, right? It's time for new faces to get in there who are just as progressive and who are ready to fight there's a new battlefront. This is not the same politics of the 90s. What's going on today is not the same thing that we saw in the 90s. There is no opportunity for bipartisanship. And let me qualify that because people may be offended by that sentence. We're dealing with a very rabid strain of conservatism that has been playing hardball politics with the Democrats since the 90s. But Democrats didn't get the message until, I don't know if they've gotten the message yet. Because you still have people trying to be reasonable with these Republicans when Republicans have made it clear that they are playing a zero-sum, winner-takes-all, battle of attrition type of politics, where they are not going to move an inch, where they will break every rule, they will break every norm, they will ignore every reality, they will deny the truth, they will rewrite history, and they will betray their own belief system, their own ideology, simply to win. And if your mindset is stuck in the time when you first came to Congress back in the 90s, and you have this nostalgia for a better time of politics, a better period of politics that you experienced when you first came in the 90s, you are decidedly not equipped to fight the style of conservatism that has been there since the 90s, but you just didn't realize it until 20 years later. So this is not a knock at their individual politics and what they believe ideologically. It is to say that we need a new generation of leaders who understand the lay of the land. They understand the game that Republicans are playing, and they are going to play hardball against them. It's a great day in the city of Chicago. If you're wondering why, Mayor Rahm Emanuel has announced that he will not be seeking re-election. And if you know anything about Rahm Emanuel, you will understand why this is a good thing. Particularly if you know anything about what Rahm Emanuel has done in Chicago, you will understand why this is a good thing. But I will get to that in a moment. This is what the mayor said on Twitter yesterday. He said, quote, "On my first day as mayor, I promised to make tough decisions, even when it hurts. Today, the time has come to make another tough choice. As much as I love this job and will always love Chicago, I have decided not to seek re-election." Here. I'll get to why in a moment if you don't already know. Take a look at this clip. This is what he had to say yesterday.
The time has come to make another tough choice. As much as I love this job and will always love this city and its residents, I've decided not to seek re-election.
So the reason that I think it's such a good thing for the city of Chicago and Democratic politics in general is because Rahm Emanuel is one of the people who best represents why we can't just vote for anyone blue. You know the saying, vote for blue no matter who. Rahm Emanuel in Chicago has demonstrated exactly why that adage is so wrong. One of the things that Rahm Emanuel did that to me signifies his corruption and his disdain for anything but his agenda, let alone the things he did while he was with President Obama in the White House as chief of staff. I'll get to that in a moment. But when he was seeking re-election in the last time around, evidence is pointing to the fact that Rahm Emanuel was involved in the suppression of the video showing Laquan McDonald being gunned down by police officers. Rahm Emanuel had a hand in holding that video until after the election. And then after he was reelected, that video was forced out. And you can see that the Chicago Police Department officer executed this kid without any reason, any provocation whatsoever. You can see how this video, in fact, everyone has concluded that if this video came out, and because this happened underneath Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and because Mayor Rahm Emanuel was a part of the machine that stopped justice from occurring. He was a part of the machine that suppressed the video. He was a part of the machine that took the side of the police. And in this case, the police were absolutely wrong, subsequently having to settle outside of court. Because of that, most people who looked at this understand that Rahm Emanuel would not have been reelected in Chicago had this video came out. But because he had to run for reelection, this video magically didn't come out until a few weeks after he was reelected. So that's one of the things. The other thing that he has done, he has shut down over 50 schools, a move that displaced is the best word I could think of, about 12,000 children. 12,000 children. And this is the biggest single closure of schools that has ever occurred in the country. And the students have still not fully recovered from this action. And it was all in hopes of saving money. I mean, the mayor has demonstrated his willingness to play politics with the lives of children and to suppress information. And that's just two things. That's just two of the things. If you ask anyone who's organized in the city of Chicago, you will get a list of things that Rahm Emanuel has done to make the city worse. So him resigning is actually, or not resigning, but not running for re-election is a great thing for the city of Chicago. But our beloved President Obama would disagree with me vehemently. This is what President Obama had to say about the mayor not seeking re-election. He said, quote, "As mayor, a congressman, and my first White House chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, has been a tireless and brilliant public servant. His work to improve our schools, really, is paying dividends by helping our teachers and students achieve faster academic improvement than students in 96% of America's school districts. I've been blessed to call Rahm my friend. Whatever he chooses to do next, I know he'll continue to make a positive difference, just as he has throughout his career in public service. And Michelle and I wish Rahm and Amy all the best as they consider this next phase in their lives." Former President Barack Obama. No, sorry, Barack. I'm one of those people who still will defend your legacy against conservatives, not necessarily from the left, because there's a lot to be desired. But I digress. This is just one thing that you're absolutely wrong on. Rahm Emanuel has been a scourge on Democratic politics. I tell you what Rahm Emanuel did well. Rahm Emanuel raised money really well particularly in the 90s for Bill Clinton. He's well known for helping Bill Clinton raise a significant amount of money and help elevate him into the White House. And this is why he has become a pillar in the Democratic Party system. But just because you can raise money, just because you are a good apparatchik, doesn't mean that you are a good leader. And this is an example of someone who should have stayed in the background and did what you did well, which is to, raise money and force people out of their money. One anecdote from the book, Competence Men, if you haven't read that, you should, was that Rahm Emanuel essentially manhandled people, strong-armed money out of people. Somebody wanted to give a $5,000 donation. He would yell at them on the phone and demand, no, you're totally a $20,000 person. And using that strong arm technique, he was able to raise a significant amount of money to help Bill Clinton win. Well, just because you're good at that does not mean that you are a good person who should, I would not mind having some tough people behind me, some people who are tough as nails and who can get the job done behind me. I don't want them in front of me. I don't want them leading me because they make decisions like shutting down 50 schools that displaces 12,000 students. They make the decision that they're going to suppress the video and keep a family from getting justice in a clear case of police murder. I don't want that type of person. And if my memory serves me correct, I don't want to I want to let you know that I'm not 100% sure about this, but I vaguely remember from my time reading the book Competence Men that when President Obama was seriously considering breaking up the banks, it was Timothy Geithner and Rahm Emanuel who intentionally ignored his orders and made it clear that they were not going to break up the banks. So as people look at President Obama's failure to handle the banking crisis the way we would have from the left, I want you to always remember, and I'll go get the book and make sure. If I'm wrong, I'll let you know tomorrow. But I'm pretty confident because it stood out to me that it was Timothy Geithner and Rahm Emanuel who made sure that President Obama did not break up the banks like should have happened. It really should have happened that way in the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. That's just one man's opinion. All around, the fact of the matter is that this is a good thing that's happening in the city of Chicago, and the next mayor has a lot of work to do to undo some of the damage that Rahm Emanuel has done.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, podcast, YouTube channel, etc., etc. You can find me just about anywhere. You may go to thebenjamindixonshow.com, register for my newsletter where I break down the issues in 3 bullet points. I give you critical insights in 3 bullet points. It's called To the Point. And so now let's get to the point. Bob Woodward, one half of the Woodward and Bernstein duo that broke the Watergate story that eventually brought down Richard Nixon. He has a new book out that has the President of the United States furious. The new book is entitled Fear, Fear, Trump in the White House. Now, if you know anything about journalism, you know who Bob Woodward is, and you know his credibility. And since 1971, since he broke the story of the Watergate scandal, he has consistently been referred to as one of the most consistent and trustworthy journalists with the highest level of journalistic integrity. This doesn't mean that he can't make a mistake, but I would definitely say he has more incentive to protect the reputation that has made his entire career than anything else. I start with that because some of the allegations that are coming out of this book are what we would expect from Donald Trump, yet they are still unbelievable. And I want to go through a couple of the topics that are some of the key themes that are addressed in the book. According to the Washington Post, who broke this story on yesterday, quote, a central theme of the book is the stealthy machinations used by those in Trump's inner sanctum to try to control his impulses and prevent disasters, both for the president personally and for the nation he was elected to lead. Woodward describes an administrative coup d'etat and a nervous breakdown of the executive branch, with senior aides conspiring to pluck official papers from the president's desk so that he couldn't see or sign them. So in other words, the people around Donald Trump are pulling every stunt they possibly can to prevent a disaster. One of those disasters is a personal disaster for Donald Trump. Donald Trump's attorney, John Dowd, said this, or rather, this is what Bob Woodward reported. He said, quote, John Dowd was convinced that President Trump would commit perjury if he talked to special counsel Robert S. Mueller III. So on January 27th, the president's then personal attorney staged a practice session to try to make his point. In the White House residence, Dowd peppered Trump with questions about the Russia investigation, provoking stumbles, contradictions, and lies until the president eventually lost his cool, saying, quote, this thing's a goddamn hoax. Trump erupted at the start of a 30-minute rant that finished with him saying, I don't really want to testify. Wow. It gets worse. Here's another quote from the Washington Post, who broke the story about Donald Trump's cluelessness with regard to why we are in South Korea. Quote, at a National Security Council meeting on January 19th, Trump disregarded the significance of the massive U.S. military presence on the Korean Peninsula, including a special intelligence operation that allows the United States to detect a North Korean missile launch in 7 seconds versus 15 minutes from Alaska. According to Woodward, Trump questioned why the government was spending resources in the region at all. And this line right here is something. He said, Mattis said this, we're doing this in order to prevent World War III, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told him. After Trump left the meeting, Woodward recounts, Mattis was particularly exasperated and alarmed, telling close associates that the president acted like and had the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader. Again, these are not things that are surprising because it's Donald Trump, but they're still shocking at the level of ignorance that the president genuinely operates in, and to the terrifying notion that this is the man who is in charge of our nation and is in charge of our nuclear arsenal. Here's something that, if you talk about things that actually matter substantively, it's strange because the substantive things, the true things that would disqualify Donald Trump probably won't register with the American public because it's all baked into the system. We know Donald Trump is a moron. But this next thing is something that actually could hurt Donald Trump politically. His opinion and what he said, allegedly said, according to the book, about Jeff Sessions. Quote, Trump called Sessions a traitor for recusing himself from overseeing the Russian investigation. Woodward writes, mocking Sessions' accent, Trump added, this guy is mentally retarded. He's this dumb Southerner. He couldn't even be a one-person country lawyer down in Alabama. Now, again, his insult of Jeff Sessions, I don't really care about the Keebler Klansman, as I refer to him. He doesn't need to be in office. But this is low-hanging fruit. This is not as substantive as the other issues. However, this may be the one that resonates with his evangelical Southern base. They probably will just reject it and pretend like, oh, these are all lies and fabrications. But deep in their heart, they absolutely know this is Donald Trump's true opinion of people from the South and his opinion of Jeff Sessions. Now, here's one that I think, again, doesn't surprise me, but absolutely shows who Donald Trump really is. This is what he said with regard to the Charlottesville riot and his subsequent his condemnation of Nazis that he reluctantly gave. He said, quote, Trump was sharply criticized for initially saying that both sides were to blame. At the urging of advisors, he then condemned white supremacists and neo-Nazis, but almost immediately told aides, "That was the biggest effing mistake I've made and the worst speech I've ever given," according to Woodward's account. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Donald Trump is the white supremacist in chief. He understands. I mean, he's a moron in many ways, but he understands his support base. If Donald Trump isn't astute in anything else, it's who elected him. It's in understanding who elected him. He understands who his core support group is. And this demonstrates that he is fully aware that he is supported by neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and white nationalists across this country. And that's why he hated this. And this is why he said, and keep in mind, somebody died. Someone died in Charlottesville as a result of these neo-Nazis and these fascists. But that didn't matter to Donald Trump. He said that this was the biggest effing mistake he's ever made. This is genuinely who Donald Trump is. Donald J. Trump is. We were all wondering when Donald Trump was going to weigh in on Nike endorsing Colin Kaepernick with the most recent ad that we covered yesterday, the Just Do It ad, where I believe they said something along the lines that sacrifice, you have to sacrifice everything. So I don't remember it. Maybe it wasn't a good ad, but I digress. The point is Nike stood by Colin Kaepernick since 2011 all the way through, and they gave him a sweetheart deal. That includes endorsements, advertisements, sneakers, T-shirts, and jerseys. I don't know if jerseys are included, but you get the picture. And we were wondering, we knew Donald Trump could not hold it in for long. He tweeted the following out this morning. He said this, quote, "Just like the NFL, whose ratings have gone way down, Nike is getting absolutely killed with anger and boycotts. I wonder if they had any idea that it would be this way. As far as the NFL is concerned, I just find it hard to watch and always will until they stand for the flag." Okay. No, not really. The protests and the burning of their apparel, I guess logic is not a key component of, or a requisite of being a Republican, because for you to burn their apparel and their shoes, that means you've already bought it, which means they already have your money. You're just burning your money. You might as well take money out of your pocket and just set it on fire. That's how smart you guys are. And in terms of intensity, the conservatives have tried to boycott everything. I mean, and just go down the list of things they tried to boycott, and nobody has been affected at all. Nike absolutely took it into consideration whether or not this investment into Colin Kaepernick was going to pay off some dividends, right? And to be sure, what they did was not a social statement as much as it was a business decision. I don't look at Nike as some moral institution, because they're not, right? They still have sweatshops across the globe. But the point is that they decided to use some of those sweatshop profits and to stand behind Colin Kaepernick, giving him a job, essentially. I mean, Kaepernick would have been out of work altogether, out of money altogether, had it not been for Nike. And Kaepernick has been funneling his money through charities that invest in social movements and advocacy. So it's, in a way, it's like capitalism paying for its own demise. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is Donald Trump is trying to make this be so. It's not the case that the backlash is so much so that they're getting killed by anger and boycotts. There's no way for him to actually know that. Besides that not really being the point, he's trying to speak this into existence, so to speak. He's trying to encourage his supporters to go out there and be angry at Nike and to boycott Nike. And all this is going to do is just encourage the other side to purchase more. Conservatives don't have that mobilizing capacity in terms of righteous indignation to shut down a movement. They don't. The best that I think that conservatives can do is deplatform. Both sides have demonstrated their ability to get someone deplatformed, but they haven't shown the ability to actually end a company based on their boycotts, because they're not accustomed to this type of protest. You have to understand, they represent power. not only in terms of who's occupying the White House, the Senate, the Congress, and the majority on the Supreme Court. Yes, that is one form of power that they represent, but conservatives also represent institutional power over the years. That's what they want to conserve. They don't want to progress to a different generation, to a different era in American politics, because they have been the beneficiaries of the current power structure. And so why would people who are the beneficiaries of the current power structure have to understand how to mobilize and organize and to conduct boycotts? They don't, because who are they boycotting? Right? That's like someone on the, I was going to give a really bad example of a plantation, but I'm going to stop mid-sentence so I don't have to, apologize to David. But the point is this, Nike is doing just fine. I don't personally care whether they're doing fine or not, outside of the context of their support for Colin Kaepernick specifically, because Colin Kaepernick has demonstrated that he is going to support social movements, even though it might be some of his last dollars. He has invested millions of dollars into local activists who are out in the streets making a change. One last thing on this before we go to a break. The whole deal about the NFL and kneeling for the flag, as I've covered in great detail on many times, this has absolutely nothing to do with respecting the flag. I want you to remember it. If not, go to my page, thebenjamindixonshow.com, and catch one of the videos where I covered that Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee 2 weeks before anyone said anything. They had pictures of him. They made comments about it, but no one actually had any problem with it. They were just curious as to why. It wasn't until they found out why he was protesting that they started to lose their mind, conservatives in particular. Oh, he's protesting police violence. Well, this is disrespectful. Right? That's number one. They did not have a problem with Colin Kaepernick until they found out why he was protesting. Number two, he actually got the idea of kneeling during the anthem from someone in the military, right? Or a former Marine or something along those lines. So the idea that it's disrespectful to the flag is absolutely ridiculous. But then it's even more ridiculous to suggest that it's disrespectful to the troops. Number one, because he got the idea from a former troop. And number two, because it has nothing to do with the troops. The flag isn't the representation of our troops, even though in this uber nationalism that they're trying to push onto us, they want to make the flag synonymous with the troops, but it's not the case. And we're not talking about the flag or the troops. We're actually talking about kneeling during the national anthem, which itself is a problematic document, yes, because of its reference towards slavery in the third stanza. Just wanted to put that out there. But the point is that they had no problem with this protest until they found out why he was protesting. If they found out he was protesting something that they agree with, then they would be championing him right now, today. No questions asked. Anyone who says otherwise is a liar. That's number one. Number two, I don't even know what number I'm on at this point. But last but not least, how about that? Last but not least, you have to understand people in power will never approve of any type of protest. So they're going to make you chase the wild goose. It's a wild goose chase, because they're always going to say, oh, you should protest like this. But as soon as you protest like that, then they're going to say, oh, no, that's disrespectful. You have to protest like this. That's because your protest fundamentally challenge their power structure. And so they will never approve of your way of protesting, because your protests are a threat to entrenched power. So all of this is one big presentation of them protecting their power. This is all one big game to them to say, oh, you have to do it this way. And as soon as you do it that way, they're going to find a new way to criticize what you're protesting. Ultimately, people in power, whether it is literal power in the White House, the Congress, the Senate, the Supreme Court, locally, whatever, or if it's in structural institutional power, beneficiaries of this power structure like conservatives are, they will never agree with any means of protest, because what you're protesting fundamentally threatens their power structure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Part of the strategy that Republicans use to maintain this level of unreasonableness that we talked about in the last segment, part of that strategy has been to weaponize stupidity. I want you to hear me out. And I know we on the left, we as progressives and Democrats, we try to be reasonable and we don't like to use harsh language. We don't even want to call Donald Trump a liar, even though he's proven himself to be a liar. But I want to share a tweet on your screen from someone who writes for this guy named Jacob Wall. He writes for Gateway Pundit, which is a rag. But, you know, it's worth pointing out, not only because of how many retweets and likes it got, because I think it is a great example of how Republicans weaponize stupidity to their political advantage. And this is what he said on Twitter. He said, quote, Obama nationalized healthcare. Obama nationalized the media. Obama nationalized mortgages. I'm sorry. Obama nationalized banking. Obama nationalized housing. Obama nationalized education, in parentheses, Common Core. Obama was the fascist. He's doing a couple of things here, but I don't feel like it's necessary for us to break down the illogic of this. Because it just, at face value, anybody with a modicum of common sense should understand that none of these things happened. I mean, I really wish, as one of my friends on Twitter said, I wish Obama was as radical as white conservatives say he was, or was afraid of him because of. Like if Obama was as radical as they thought, a lot of things would be better in America, but he wasn't. Obama said it himself. His policies, he tried to set it in the 80s. He said, my policies in the 80s would have made me a moderate Republican. Well, his policies today make him a moderate Republican. There's nothing extreme about Barack Obama's presidency whatsoever. He's a strict institutionalist. He did not make moves that he could have made in order to get legislation passed because he wanted to respect the institutions. President Obama was as milquetoast of a U.S. president as you can get, and that you could take that as an insult or you could take that as a compliment. The fact of the matter is he was no radical. But that's besides the point. The point of this tweet is a continuation in the weaponization of stupidity that we see on the right. And the irony of this is that the right is trying to present themselves now as the intellectuals. And they are intellectualizing stupidity. They are intellectualizing bigotry. What they're wrapping up in an intellectual presentation in terms of the stage, in terms of the setting, in terms of their wardrobes. Instead of being with tiki torches and burning crosses, they're in a suit and tie and they're speaking in a presentable manner, when the fact of the matter is what they're passing off to the body politic is that they're passing off extreme ignorance and extreme bigotry wrapped up in the veneer of intellectualism. But they accomplished this by dumbing down. They have dumbed down their base to the point where they will accept drivel like this, saying that Obama nationalized healthcare and the media. I mean, when I pay my premium every month, it's going to a corporation. Right. This has not been nationalized. When I watch the news, it's always a private company who is spreading news across this country. But that's besides the point. They don't care that they are factually wrong. They will not be held accountable for their factual inaccuracies. They will not be held accountable for spewing some of the most ignorant and bigoted bile that we've seen in generations, because their audience appreciates the fact that at all costs, no matter what comes, no matter what the situation is, they are capable of spinning an issue to attack President Obama, former President Obama, and the Democratic Party and the left in general. That's it. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how ignorant what you say is, so long as you give people on social media and people watching Fox News the ability to be angry at the left and to think that everything conservatives do is right, then then you get a platform. You get a platform. You get a job. You get a raise. You get funded by the Koch brothers. You get funded by this conservative think tank or so-called think tank, because you have demonstrated that there's nothing that you won't be disingenuous about. There's nothing that you won't lie about. And there's nothing too ignorant for you to share and then subsequently have it spread across social media. That's all that matters. They have weaponized stupidity because they understand they will never be held accountable for what they say. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Not only will they not be held accountable for the ignorant things that they say, their revisionist history, their outright lies, and their outright spread of bigotry, but they get promoted because of it. When your audience is such that they don't hold you accountable for anything and they will agree with anything that you say, then there's nothing that you can say that will get you in trouble with the audience, first of all, but they love you all the more. So you get a promotion. That's how you get people on large platforms like Jordan Peterson, like the Candace Owens of the world. They are not intellectuals. They're simply rapping ignorance. They're rapping revisionist histories like Dinesh D'Souza, like all of these superstars on the right. They're wrapping their lies and propaganda in the veneer of intellectualism, and that sells like hotcakes on the right. So long as you can get a person to feel like I'm not really ignorant, even though what I'm saying has to be some of the most ridiculous and stupid things that we've heard, so long as you can make people feel okay about themselves and the bigotry that they exist in and the level of ignorance that they exist in, then you get a promotion and you get a platform. That is how they have weaponized ignorance on the right. And we on the left continue to hold ourselves to a standard, which we should, but we have to understand the lay of the land. We have to understand what we're fighting against. We have to understand that these people are playing for keeps, and there's nothing that they will not do to win. They are willing to break every rule, to rewrite every bit of history, to lie about everything directly to your face, even when you have video evidence to the contrary. They will do all of this simply to win. And that in that type of environment, you cannot afford to try to triangulate and negotiate with them. You have to beat them. I'll be with you all week long. David, hope you're enjoying your time away. The bonus show is coming up, and we will see you there. Take care, everyone.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.